I'm Lauren Mitchell, 32, a trauma nurse living in Denver when my world flipped upside down with one unexpected phone call. Ms. Mitchell, you're 3 months behind on your mortgage payments, the bank representative said. I blinked. What mortgage? I'd never even owned a home. The loan? $623,000. My hands shook as I opened the documents they emailed. The signature looked exactly like mine, only it wasn't. The property address? A modern ranch-style home in Cherry Creek, my sister Danielle's dream house. Tonight, we were all supposed to gather for our usual family dinner at our parents' place. I was bringing dessert. What I was really bringing? A police report folded neatly inside my purse. Before I walk you through the night that broke my family apart, I'd love to know. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted most? Drop your story or your location in the comments. And don't forget to hit subscribe if this hits close to home. Until that call, I thought my life was modest, but whole. I'd been working as a nurse at St. Luke's Medical Center for almost 8 years, specializing in trauma care. It was hard work, blood, panic, heartbreaking losses, but also filled with moments of grace and second chances. My coworkers were like a second family. Outside of work, my life was calm. I lived in a cozy one-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill, decorated with thrift shop finds and way too many succulents. Friends teased me for naming them all. Yes, even the cactus on the windowsill. But coming home to something alive made long shifts feel lighter. My family? We were close. My parents, Tom and Renee Mitchell, still lived in the craftsman-style home where Danielle and I grew up. Dad retired from his plumbing business last year, while Mom still tutors part-time, claiming she'll stop once the students stop making her laugh. They were loving, traditional, and devoted to both their girls. Danielle, older by 5 years, was always the star. She lit up every room, smart, charming, ambitious. She had been the class president, lead in the school musical, and editor of the yearbook, while I kept to myself with books and science projects. There was no jealousy, at least not that I admitted. I adored her. She protected me in school, encouraged me through nursing exams, and cheered my every success. So how did she justify taking out a $623,000 mortgage in my name and never telling me? That night at dinner, I was about to find out. She married Eric Dalton, a financial consultant 6 years ago. They looked like they belonged on a magazine cover, both tall, trim, always sun-kissed from weekend ski trips in Aspen or snorkeling excursions in the Maldives. Their Instagram feed was a highlight reel of champagne brunches, charity fundraisers, and matching golf polos at country clubs I couldn't afford to visit, let alone join. Meanwhile, I stayed grounded, single, focused on my ER shifts, and occasionally giving in to a blind date arranged by overly hopeful coworkers. Our lifestyles were miles apart, but we still met for Sunday coffee now and then. And our parents insisted on dinner together twice a month. Danielle would sometimes throw in casual remarks about thinking bigger or ask if I'd started investing yet, suggesting luxury real estate projects with a twinkle in her eye. I figured she meant well, just trying to help her little sister catch up. 9 months ago, Danielle and Eric upgraded from their sleek downtown loft to a sprawling 2-story in Denver's Hilltop neighborhood, a pristine area filled with historic homes and quiet, tree-lined streets. The housewarming was a full production, catered bites, a jazz trio, and personalized gift bags for every guest. I remember trailing behind her in awe as she pointed out custom cabinetry, imported marble, and built-in wine storage. "You'll have this one day too, Lore," she said, giving my shoulder a squeeze. "Just need to stop thinking small." The day it all began seemed unremarkable at first. It was a routine Tuesday, and I was midway through my shift at St. Luke's, changing the dressing on a boy named Eli after a routine appendectomy. That's when my phone buzzed. Normally, I'd ignore it during rounds, but my elderly upstairs neighbor, Ruth, had been hospitalized the night before, and I was waiting on a call from her daughter. "Hello, this is Lauren," I answered quickly in the hallway. "Ms. Mitchell, this is Chris Donovan from Rocky Mountain First Bank," came the voice on the line. "We've been trying to reach you regarding missed mortgage payments." My brows furrowed. I think there's a mistake. I don't have a mortgage. I rent an apartment. There's a mortgage in your name for $623,000, he said, his tone shifting. A property on East Highland Avenue. You made 3 payments. None since March. We're now facing possible foreclosure. Highland Avenue. My chest tightened. That was Danielle's new address. I never bought a house, I said, louder than I meant to. A nearby nurse turned her head. I'm a nurse, not a doctor. I couldn't qualify for that loan even if I wanted to. But someone else had, and they used my name. There was a pause on the line. Then the banker said, the application lists your annual income as $192,000, with a credit score of 782 at the time of approval. We have full documentation, Ms. Mitchell. Your signature is on every form. I stood frozen in the hallway. I'm sorry, but I've never earned that much in my life. Perhaps you could stop by the branch to review everything in person, he added, trying to sound helpful. I agreed, though I felt like I was underwater, barely hearing the words. I returned to Eli's room in a daze, going through the motions of patient care while my mind scrambled for answers. Clerical error? Identity theft? But the address, Highland Avenue, was no coincidence. It had to be Danielle's. That afternoon, I walked into Rocky Mountain First Bank, still clinging to a thread of denial. Richard Peterson, the branch manager, greeted me with an apologetic expression and led me to his office. A thick folder waited on his desk. Page by page, my heart sank. Mortgage documents, income verification, a detailed credit check, closing paperwork, all neatly filled out and signed, with my name, my handwriting, perfectly forged. And there it was again, 1682 East Highland Avenue, Danielle's new address. Can I get copies of all of this? I asked, though I barely recognized my own voice. Richard nodded, hesitating for just a second. Technically, these are your records. But yes, I can make you duplicates. He leaned forward, voice lower. Ms. Mitchell, if you didn't authorize this loan, this is identity theft and possibly felony fraud. You need to contact the authorities. I nodded, stunned. But inside, the truth was roaring. This wasn't just some stranger behind a screen. This wasn't a random scam. This was Danielle, my sister. The next few days blurred together. I called in sick, something I hadn't done in over 2 years. Because how could I care for others when my own life was spiraling? My apartment, once my cozy refuge, now felt like a pressure chamber. I couldn't sit still. I paced, scrolled through every photo I had of Danielle, replayed every conversation, every offhand comment I'd brushed off before. Could it have been a clerical accident? Maybe she filled out the wrong name? Number. Looking at those documents, any lingering doubt shattered. The signatures were practiced. My social security number, my birth date, my employer's address. Someone who knew me well. Someone who knew everything. I called Equifax. At first, the rep sounded disinterested, until I explained what was happening. Then her voice shifted. Let me pull up your credit report, Ms. Mitchell. Typing. A pause. There are multiple new accounts opened within the last year. The mortgage is the biggest, but there's also a $150,000 home equity line, 3 credit cards with limits of $20,000 to $30,000, and a personal loan for $45,000. My stomach dropped. All of it. Fraudulent. All of it in my name. I didn't open any of those accounts, I said, voice trembling. I understand, Ms. Mitchell, the Equifax representative replied. I'm initiating a fraud alert on your profile now. I'll email you instructions to file disputes for each account. By the end of that exhausting day, I had spoken to all 3 major credit bureaus, placed fraud alerts, and watched my once solid credit score of 724 nosedive to 546. Missed mortgage payments, maxed out credit cards, personal loans I never touched. It felt like my identity had been dragged through a minefield. The next morning, I met with Diane Schwartz, a financial advisor a colleague had recommended. Her office in Cherry Creek was warm, decorated with soft lighting and a big pot of chamomile tea. But none of it calmed the knot in my chest as I handed over the folder of mortgage paperwork and forged documents. This is textbook identity theft, Diane confirmed after a careful review. But it's not amateur work. Whoever did this knew exactly how to navigate bank verification systems. It was my sister, I whispered, the words tasting bitter and raw. She's living in the house right now. That address? It's hers. Diane looked up sharply. The concern in her face deepened. That complicates things. Unfortunately, family-based fraud is more common than you'd think, but emotionally, it's far more devastating. I nodded. What do I do now? Legally, it's clear. You need to file a police report, she said gently. That's the only way banks will officially recognize you as the victim rather than a co-signer. But I understand. It's hard when the person at fault is someone you love. Hard didn't even begin to describe it. Danielle had been my role model growing up, my protector, the sister who defended me from bullies and helped me move into my first apartment. I couldn't reconcile her with the person who had done this. Still, I needed more than gut instinct. Before going to the police, I reached out to Marcus Bell, a forensic handwriting expert. I brought him the mortgage paperwork along with samples of my actual signature from my work ID and passport. After reviewing them under magnification, Marcus nodded. These are forged, carefully, but definitely forged. The pen pressure, the hesitation in your capital L, the forger was mimicking, not writing freely. Could you testify to that? I asked. If needed, yes, he said. From there, I quietly began piecing together Danielle's financial situation. I had no legal access, but through social media posts, whispers from mutual friends, and a few vague family conversations, I uncovered troubling signs. Her real estate commissions had dried up during the market slump. Eric's firm had pushed him out over rumored improprieties, and his new consulting venture wasn't landing clients. And yet, the trips, the shopping, the parties, they never stopped. Their life of luxury? Built on smoke, and now on my name. If anything, their lifestyle had grown more extravagant. Eric had just posted a photo of their new boat on Instagram, captioned, "Lake weekends just got better." And not long after, they joined a private golf and racket club in Cherry Hills that cost more than my entire annual rent. The most damning piece of information came from my friend Stephanie, who worked in finance at a luxury auto dealership outside Boulder. We met for coffee, and after glancing around to make sure no one was listening, she leaned in. "I probably shouldn't say this," she murmured, "but Danielle came in a couple of months ago to buy a new Mercedes." My stomach clenched. When we ran her credit, it was a disaster. Eric ended up paying in full, cash. I overheard them fighting in the lot afterward. He said something like, "We can't keep doing this. The house was risky enough." The house. My house. According to every lender on record. Digging deeper, I found several active credit accounts tied to my name. The statements were paperless, routed through a slightly altered email, laurenm83@gmail.com. Close enough to mine, laurenmitchell93@gmail.com, to slip through basic verification checks unnoticed. It was intentional. All of it. Calculated. Each new discovery pressed heavier on my chest, replacing confusion with an unbearable sense of betrayal. Danielle hadn't made a mistake. She had methodically built a false financial identity, mine, to fund a life she couldn't afford. A week into my investigation, I knew what had to be done. With a file full of documentation and a stomach full of dread, I drove to the Denver Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. The building wasn't some dramatic glass-walled headquarters. It was tucked between city offices, lit by cold fluorescents and filled with decades-old furniture. I waited for nearly an hour before a detective called my name. "Lauren Mitchell?" I stood. A woman in her mid-40s with cropped brown hair gave me a tired but kind nod. "I'm Detective Rachel Thompson. Sorry for the delay. Come with me." She led me into a sparse interview room. One table, 3 chairs, and a security camera quietly blinking in the corner. She caught me glancing at it. "Standard. For your protection and ours. You're here about identity theft?" "Yes," I whispered. "By my sister." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe sympathy, before she settled back into professionalism. "I see," she said. "Unfortunately, That's more common than you might think. Let's start from the beginning. For the next 2 hours, I told Detective Thompson everything, from the phone call from the bank to the mountain of fraudulent accounts, to the house Danielle now lived in that had been purchased with my stolen identity. She took notes methodically, occasionally pausing to ask for dates, names, or clarification on details. She seemed especially focused on how Danielle could have gotten access to my personal information. Did you two ever share financial accounts, joint cards, storage units? Has she lived with you recently? No, I said, shaking my head. But we were close. At least I thought we were. She's been to my apartment plenty of times. I hesitated before admitting the next part. My important documents, birth certificate, tax forms, social, are in a file cabinet in my office. It's not locked. Detective Thompson's expression softened. No one expects this from family, she said gently. It's not your fault. When I finally finished, she leaned back in her chair and folded her hands. Ms. Mitchell, I need to be completely transparent. Filing this report initiates a formal investigation. And if we find sufficient evidence, which, frankly, it sounds like we will, your sister could be facing multiple felony charges. Identity theft, mortgage fraud, wire fraud, these are serious crimes. She could go to prison, she added quietly. Are you prepared for that outcome? Her words struck like a punch to the ribs. Was I prepared to be the reason Danielle might lose her freedom? Her marriage, her career. I thought about the childhood memories. Danielle teaching me how to swim, braiding my hair for school dances, defending me when neighborhood boys made fun of my braces. Then I thought of the $623,000 mortgage, the wrecked credit, the endless hours cleaning up her mess, the betrayal. Yes, I said at last. I need to protect myself. If she ends up facing the consequences, that's not on me. It's on her. Detective Thompson nodded solemnly. We'll conduct the investigation discreetly, but if it leads to formal charges, the case will be public record. You understand that? I do. She slid a form toward me. This is your official identity theft report. Read carefully before signing. I signed it with my real signature. A symbol of reclaiming control. The process had begun. Justice was in motion now, and even if I wanted to stop it, I couldn't. When I stepped into the lobby, Stephanie stood up, eyes full of concern. How'd it go? She asked, pulling me into a hug. As well as accusing your sister of felony fraud can go, I said, trying to laugh, but my voice cracked, and the weight of it all settled in. You did the right thing, Lauren. What she did was beyond wrong, Stephanie said, as we sat in a quiet corner of a coffee shop near Capitol Hill. I stirred my untouched chai latte, trying to ground myself as the whirlwind of the past week caught up with me. Stephanie sat across from me, listening patiently while I tried to untangle my thoughts. The detective said the investigation's underway, I said quietly. They're reaching out to the bank, issuing subpoenas, maybe even interviewing Danielle. How do you think she'll react? Stephanie asked gently. I stared at the foam swirling in my cup. She'll deny it first. Danielle's always been a master at spinning a story. Then she'll justify it, say she was trying to help, or that she meant to pay it all back eventually. Do you think she really did? Stephanie asked. I considered that. Maybe she convinced herself she would. But practically? They were already missing payments. They had no plan, just impulse and entitlement. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was Detective Thompson. We've confirmed your suspicions, Ms. Mitchell. The mortgage application was submitted using your personal data, but the IP address leads back to your sister's former residence. We're also looking into her husband's potential involvement. Eric? I hadn't fully considered that angle before, but of course, a financial consultant like him would have known exactly how to manipulate application systems. There's more, she continued. We found evidence on their home computer, searches for bankruptcy laws and identity abandonment. It looks like they intended to file bankruptcy in your name once things got out of hand. I was speechless. This wasn't just recklessness. It was a coordinated, calculated betrayal. A week after I filed the report, a thick envelope arrived in the mail, official documentation from the Denver Police Department. Inside was a detailed summary of the case. Bank transfers from fraudulent accounts, Loan paperwork bearing my forged signature, credit card statements showing charges at boutiques and steakhouses I'd never been to, in dollar amounts that made me nauseous. I sat at my kitchen table, flipping through each page with a highlighter in hand, marking every damning detail. The police had built a strong case. Detective Thompson had already spoken with the district attorney. Charges were imminent. And tomorrow? Tomorrow was our bi-weekly family dinner. Danielle would be there, completely unaware that her web of lies was unraveling. She didn't know I'd received the foreclosure notice addressed to homeowner Lauren Mitchell. She didn't know I'd spent weeks digging through bank records, credit reports, and computer logs. She didn't know I'd filed a police report that now sat in a manila folder on my kitchen counter, ready to upend her perfect little illusion. As I got ready for bed, my phone chimed with a text from Mom. "Can't wait to see my girls tomorrow. Making your favorite lasagna. Love you both." The normalcy of it broke me. For the first time since all of this began, I cried. Not just for myself, but for our parents, who would soon be caught in the crossfire of a truth too awful to ignore. The next morning, I stood in front of my mirror, rehearsing how I'd confront her. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't insult her. I would stay composed, calm, unshakable. I'd let the facts do what screaming never could, cut through her lies with quiet precision. Just as I finished brushing my hair, my phone buzzed again. "Mom, sweetheart, you're still coming tonight, right?" Dad already opened a bottle of red. "Yes, Mom. I'll be there at 6, I replied, my voice steady. "Great! Danielle's bringing that chocolate mousse cake from Sugar Grove, the one you love. Isn't that sweet of her? Sweet." My sister, who had taken out loans in my name, who was about to face felony charges, buying dessert with one of my stolen credit cards. "Very thoughtful," I said, managing a neutral tone. I slipped the police report into my leather bag, zipped it shut, and took one last breath before stepping outside. Choosing what to wear had taken longer than I expected. It felt strange to care about appearance on a night like this, but it mattered. I picked a simple navy sheath dress, neat, serious, adult. Not my usual jeans and sweater family dinner look. But this wasn't just dinner. This was a reckoning. Driving through the familiar streets of Park Hill, I couldn't help but remember happier times. Mom's birthday last year, when Danielle and I surprised her with front-row ballet tickets. Or the Christmas when Dad sang "Oh Holy Night" in falsetto after too much cider, sending us into hysterics. That was before. Tonight would end the illusion. I parked a block away to gather myself. As I approached the house, I spotted Danielle's white Range Rover in the driveway. The same one she claimed she bought with bonus commissions from a luxury property sale. Now I knew better. It had been bought with my name. Had that been a lie too? Was the Range Rover bought with credit opened in my name? The familiar scent of Mom's lasagna greeted me as I approached the porch. For a moment, I thought about turning around, driving back to my apartment and texting that I wasn't feeling well. Maybe I could confront Danielle privately. Give her a chance to fix this before it became a family disaster. But then I remembered the bankruptcy searches Detective Thompson had uncovered. Danielle and Eric hadn't just used me. They were planning to walk away clean and leave me financially obliterated. Number? They deserved truth, not mercy. I rang the doorbell, the weight of the police report in my bag grounding me like a stone. "Lauren," my mom, Renee Mitchell, answered with a bright smile. At 62, she still radiated warmth, her silver-streaked hair cut in a sleek bob, her face lined with age but alive with energy. She pulled me into a tight hug. "You look lovely, sweetheart. But so serious? Rough day at the hospital?" "Just tired, Mom," I lied gently, returning the hug. "It's been a long week." Inside, Dad was already settled in his favorite recliner with a glass of red. "There's my girl," he said, rising to hug me. "Want a glass? It's that Oregon Pinot you love." "Sure, thanks, Dad." From the kitchen, I heard her. Danielle's unmistakable laugh, charming and confident. She breezed into the room wearing a crisp ivory blouse and designer slacks, her blonde hair styled to perfection. "Lauren, finally," she said, grinning. "I was just telling Mom about this great case study Dr. Garner shared at the club. He's hiring, by the way. You should talk to him. The benefits are phenomenal." I stared at her. The woman who had dismantled my financial life was now giving me career advice. I'm happy where I am, I said, keeping my tone even. If she caught the edge in my voice, she didn't show it. Eric's out back with Dad, she added cheerfully. Mom went all out. Lasagna and steaks tonight. We'll be eating leftovers for weeks. Moments later, my brother Mark arrived with his wife Jessica and their 2 kids. Jessica made a beeline for Danielle. That sunroom of yours? To die for. I stopped by during our playdate. Lauren, you'd love it with all your plants. Danielle flicked a quick glance at me. Barely noticeable. Still renovating, she replied smoothly. You know how contractors are. I bit my tongue. That sunroom, like the entire house, had been bought with my name. Dinner carried on with excruciating normalcy. Dad carved the steaks while Mom served generous portions of lasagna. The wine flowed, glasses clinking lightly amid casual conversation. Mark chatted about his new commercial design project at the architecture firm. The kids took turns sharing updates about soccer practice and a school talent show. Danielle, ever the orchestrator, gracefully dodged any talk that veered too close to her finances or the house, always managing to shift the focus to someone else's life. You've been quiet tonight, Lauren, Dad said, eyeing me over the rim of his wine glass. Long week at the hospital? I set my fork down carefully. You could say that. Anything you want to talk about? Mom asked gently, brows pulling together in concern. Danielle jumped in before I could answer. Oh, let her be, Mom. Not everyone needs to process everything out loud like I do. She laughed and flipped her hair over her shoulder. Some of us are internal processors. The irony twisted in my chest. Danielle, who had methodically torn my life apart in secret, now championing privacy. Actually, I said, locking eyes with her, there is something I'd like to talk about. With all of you. A flicker of something. Unease passed over Danielle's face before she recovered, offering her signature charming smile. Sounds heavy. Can we at least do dessert first? I brought that mousse cake from Sugar Grove. The one you love, Lauren. That can wait, I said, my tone firm and final. The room fell still. Even the children stopped whispering, sensing the shift. Mark, would you mind taking the kids to the living room? Mom said softly. I think they've earned a little screen time. Once the kids had left and the air thickened with tension, I reached into my bag and withdrew the manila folder. My heartbeat was loud in my ears. Danielle's eyes flicked to the folder, and her smile flickered, just for a second. What's that? Dad asked, glancing at the papers. I drew in a slow breath. This, I said, placing it on the table, is a police report. The table went still. Mom's mouth parted in silent shock. Dad set his glass down slowly. Eric sat up straighter, his eyes locked on the folder. A police report? Mom repeated. Lauren, are you okay? No, Mom, I said quietly. I've been the victim of a crime. And I slid the folder across the table, straight toward Danielle. If you've ever had to choose truth over family, you'll want to hear what happened next. So don't forget to subscribe and stay with me for the moment everything finally unraveled. Identity theft and fraud, I said, my voice steady. To be specific. Danielle didn't move. Her smile had vanished, her face locked in an unnatural stillness. The flicker of charm she always wore like armor was gone. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice higher than usual. Open it, I said quietly, gesturing toward the folder. Eric placed a hand on her arm. Maybe we should talk about this in private, he murmured. There's nothing to talk about, Danielle snapped, still not touching the folder. Lauren's obviously confused. My dad, never comfortable with tension, tried to force a chuckle. Girls, is this some kind of joke? Because I'm not sure I understand what's going on. It's not a joke, Dad, I said, reaching over and flipping the folder open myself. The first page, bearing the Denver Police Department's official seal and a case number, stared up from the table. 2 weeks ago, I got a call from Rocky Mountain First Bank. They said I'd missed 3 mortgage payments on a $623,000 loan I never applied for a house I've never seen. I paused. The property? 1682 East Highland Avenue. My mother gasped. But that's... Danielle and Eric's house. Exactly, I said. The house they've been bragging about for months, bought with a mortgage in my name, along with a $150,000 home equity line, 3 credit cards, and a personal loan. All opened fraudulently, all maxed out, all in default. The silence was crushing. Danielle's face had gone pale. Then she laughed, a strained, brittle sound. This is ridiculous. Clearly there's been a mix-up, a bank error, or the police disagree, I cut in. So does the handwriting expert who analyzed the forged documents. And the digital forensics report? The mortgage application came from your old Wi-Fi network. Eric abruptly stood. We're done here. Come on, Danielle. We don't have to sit through this. But Dad's voice cut in, low, firm, and shaking. Sit down, Eric. Both of you. Start explaining. Danielle's expression shifted, panic giving way to cold defiance. Fine. You want the truth? Eric's firm collapsed last year. His partner drained their accounts. My commissions dried up when the market turned. She looked around the table. We were desperate. Everything we built was crumbling. So you stole my name? I asked, stunned. You buried me in over $800,000 in debt? It was supposed to be temporary, she muttered. We were going to fix it, pay it off. You weren't supposed to find out. And if you want to know what happened after the truth came out, you're going to want to stick around. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what came next. Danielle's voice sharpened. Once the market bounced back, once Eric landed new clients, we were going to refinance everything the right way. That's a lie, I said, my voice low. The police found your searches, guides on declaring bankruptcy in my name. You were never going to make this right. You were going to leave me ruined so you could keep playing house. My mother's quiet sobs broke the tense silence. My father's face was flushed a deep, dangerous red. Danielle, he said slowly, his voice tight with fury. Tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't do this to your sister. Danielle looked like she might try another denial. But then something cracked. Her shoulders sagged, and the defiance drained from her face. We were desperate, she whispered. You don't understand what it's like to have reached a certain level of lifestyle, status, and then feel it all slipping away. People expect us to succeed. Clients, friends, family. I expected you to be my sister, I said, tears brimming, to love me, not betray me. Suddenly, Eric whipped around to face her. I told you this would blow up. I said we needed another option. Danielle snapped. What option, Eric? Your brilliant strategies lost us everything. So you committed felony fraud using your sister's name? He shouted back. You realize we could go to prison for this? My parents watched, stricken, as the couple unraveled in front of them. Then my dad stood, hands trembling. Get out, he said, voice sharp with grief. Both of you. Get out of my house. Dad, please. Danielle choked, her eyes shining with tears. Whether genuine or calculated, I couldn't tell anymore. You have to understand. I understand perfectly, he interrupted. You stole from your sister. You lied to all of us. You were ready to destroy Lauren's life to protect your own illusion. I don't know who you are anymore. My mother, still crying, looked at Danielle with deep heartbreak. How could you? She whispered. After everything we taught you about integrity, about family, what happened to you? Nothing happened, Danielle said, her voice rising again. I just refused to fail. A bitter smirk crept onto her face. Unlike the rest of this family, I have ambition. I have standards. Do you really think I wanted to end up like Lauren, alone in a tiny apartment surrounded by houseplants? The casual cruelty hit me like a slap. That's how you see me? I asked. A failure, because I don't drive a Mercedes or flaunt fake wealth? You could have had more, Danielle hissed. You're smart enough, but you settled. But you've always settled, Danielle sneered. Let's be honest, you weren't even using your perfect credit score for anything that mattered. Eric reached for her arm. Enough, Danielle. We're leaving. Now. He turned to me, his jaw clenched. This isn't over, Lauren. You don't understand what you've started by filing that report. I understand exactly, I replied, my voice even. I protected myself from criminals. That's what you are, both of you. And now you'll face the consequences. As they grabbed their things in stiff silence, my mother called after them. The police. Will they arrest you? Danielle hesitated at the front door. For a moment, something broke through her facade. Something real. Fear. I don't know, Mom, she whispered. Probably. The door shut behind them with a quiet finality. The three of us sat in stunned silence. Dad poured himself another glass of wine, his hand trembling as he set the bottle down. Mom dabbed her eyes with a napkin, her face drawn, looking older than she had just hours ago. I should have seen it, she murmured. The spending, the house, the Range Rover. We knew they couldn't afford any of it. I just thought they were being reckless. Not this. None of us saw it, I said gently, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. I never imagined Danielle would do this. Not to a stranger, and definitely not to me. Dad stared at the police report still open in front of him. So what now? The district attorney decides whether to file charges. Detective Thompson thinks it's likely. They'll probably be arrested within the week. And the debt? Dad asked, the numbers already running in his mind like a spreadsheet. I'm working with the banks. The police report helps prove I'm the victim, not an accomplice. But it'll take time. My credit is wrecked. For now. We sat like that for a long time, grieving, absorbing, quietly supporting one another in the wake of what had just been torn open. Mark came back downstairs after putting his kids to bed. We told him everything. At first, disbelief, then fury. I'll testify if I have to, he said, his voice hard. What she did to you, Lauren. Unforgivable. Driving home that night, the weight of it all pressed down on me. I had done what was necessary, but the relief was hollow. I wasn't angry anymore, just empty. I'd lost the sister I thought I knew, and gained a story I never wanted to tell. If you've ever had to choose between justice and family loyalty, you'll want to hear what came next. Subscribe, and stay with me for the aftermath no one saw coming. 3 days after that dinner, Detective Thompson called me with an update. Warrants have been issued, she said. Danielle and Eric were taken into custody this morning at their residence. My residence, legally speaking, at least on the fraudulent mortgage paperwork. They were charged with multiple felonies: identity theft, wire fraud, forgery, and criminal conspiracy. Their arrests made the local news. The headline flashed across my screen later that night. Prominent Denver realtor and financial advisor charged in family identity theft scheme. The article referred to the victim only as a relative, but anyone who knew us wouldn't have to guess. My phone buzzed for hours. Messages from coworkers, childhood friends, extended family, even old classmates I hadn't heard from in years. Is it true? How are you holding up? Did you really not know? Are they going to prison? I turned my phone off. I couldn't deal with it. The concern, the gossip, the judgment. My parents were devastated. Dad stopped going to his weekly golf group. He couldn't bear the whispers from men he'd shared coffee and tea times with for 20 years. Mom took a leave from the elementary school she'd taught at for decades, citing medical stress. But when I visited, she was quiet, withdrawn, and visibly aged. Everyone must be talking, she murmured. Her hair, normally curled and sprayed into place, hung limp. Her eyes looked hollow, wondering where we went wrong with Danielle. You didn't go wrong, I told her, but I couldn't help wondering the same. Had we missed the signs, the subtle lies, the rationalizations? She made a mistake, my mom said again days later, over the phone. But she's still your sister, still our daughter. The boys need their mother. Maybe you could ask the DA to reduce the charges? I gripped the phone tightly. She stole my identity. She intended to declare bankruptcy under my name, Mom. That could have destroyed my ability to rent, get a loan, even keep my job. I know what she did was wrong. Unforgivable even, she whispered. But Lauren, she has 2 young boys. They need her. And that was the hardest part. Because I love those kids. I still do. But how do you weigh the innocence of children against the betrayal of a sister? How do you protect yourself without breaking what's left of your family? If you've ever had to make an impossible choice between justice and forgiveness, stay with me. There's more to this story than headlines. Harper and Ethan, just 5 and 7, were innocent in all of this. I adored those kids. I'd babysat them during countless date nights, brought them souvenirs from conferences, holidays, layovers. And now, because of the charges I filed, they might lose both their parents to prison. For a moment, my resolve wavered. Maybe I could speak to the DA about a plea. Maybe Danielle could repay what she owed without serving time. It was Stephanie who helped me find my footing again. She took me out to a quiet bar in the Highlands, far from our usual spots, poured me a drink, and said firmly, "Listen, Danielle made her choices. She didn't trip and fall into felony charges. She set her vodka tonic down with purpose. She chose to defraud you. She chose to steal your name. She chose to put her kids at risk, not you. That guilt you're carrying, it's not yours. My parents," I began. "Are doing what parents do," she interrupted. "But they're protecting the wrong child. You are the victim, Lauren. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for refusing to be destroyed." She was right. The following week, when I met with District Attorney Natalie Chin, I made my stance clear. I would not request a reduced sentence. "Ms. Mitchell, I want to commend your strength," Natalie said. "Most victims in family-related identity theft cases pull out under pressure. But these crimes have serious long-term effects. They deserve accountability." The legal process dragged for months. Motions, hearings, continuances. Meanwhile, I went back to my nursing shifts, tried to keep my head above water, and spent hours rebuilding my credit. 9 months after the confrontation, the plea deal was finalized. I sat silently in the courtroom as my sister stood before the judge, her once glamorous look replaced by a plain navy suit. She looked thinner, more fragile. "Danielle Mitchell, you've pleaded guilty to 1 count of identity theft, 1 count of fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy," the judge said. "Do you wish to speak before sentencing?" Danielle turned to the gallery, eyes locking on mine. "I want to apologize to my sister," she said. "What I did was inexcusable. I betrayed her trust in the worst way, and I will regret it for the rest of my life." She paused. I was desperate, terrified of failing, but that doesn't excuse what I did. The judge sentenced Danielle to 18 months in federal prison, Eric to 12. Both would face 3 years of supervised release and were ordered to pay restitution. As Danielle was led away, our eyes met. One final time. And for the first time, I saw her not as my sister, but as the woman who nearly destroyed me. If you've ever had to walk away from someone you love to save yourself, subscribe and stay with me. Because the next chapter is one of healing. There was so much left unsaid between us, so much damage that might never fully heal. I didn't know if forgiveness would ever come. But in that moment, watching Danielle be led out of the courtroom, I understood the complexity of it all. Anger and betrayal knotted together with flashes of childhood laughter, secret handshakes, late-night talks. Love had existed once, and maybe, in some form, it still did. The weeks after the sentencing blurred into a fog of paperwork and emotional exhaustion. The bank foreclosed on the house, my house on paper, and sold it at auction for less than the mortgage. I worked closely with the credit bureaus to clear the fraudulent accounts. It was slow, bureaucratic, and required hours of calls, notarized letters, and explaining the unexplainable. My relationship with my parents remained polite but hollow. They visited Danielle regularly at the minimum security facility she was assigned to, but seldom mentioned it. When we did talk, our conversations tiptoed across neutral topics: the weather, Mom's garden, the kids' report cards. Thanksgiving came and went. It was the first one I'd ever spent away from the Mitchell family table. They invited me. I declined. Instead, I sat at Stephanie's kitchen island, surrounded by her loud, loving family, quietly grateful for the warmth I hadn't realized I'd missed. Christmas wasn't much different. I left gifts for my parents on their porch, but didn't stay for dinner. The holiday routines that had once defined us now felt foreign, cracked by silence and secrets. Then, One early March afternoon, a letter arrived. Not from Danielle, whose apologies I still wasn't ready to read, but from Harper. Written on pink stationery in uneven letters, it read, "Dear Aunt Lauren, I miss you a lot. Grandma says you're mad at Mommy because she did something bad. I get mad at Mommy too, like when she says no second dessert. But I still love her. Do you still love her? Can you come see me and Ethan? We have a new apartment. It's small. It doesn't have a garden like the big house. Love, Harper." Tears welled in my eyes. Harper didn't understand the weight of what had happened, only that someone she loved was missing. Whatever my feelings for Danielle, Harper and Ethan were innocent. That night, I picked up the phone and called my parents. "I'd like to visit the kids," I said. And for the first time in months, my mother's voice softened. "They'd love that." The relief in my mother's voice was unmistakable. "They ask about you all the time," she said. "We've been taking care of them while Danielle and Eric are away. They'd love to see you." That weekend visit with Harper and Ethan became the first tentative step towards something like healing. Not forgiveness exactly, but a quiet acknowledgement that family doesn't vanish when it fractures. It reshapes itself, demands new terms, new boundaries, new understandings of what trust really means. The day the Highland Drive house officially sold at foreclosure auction, I drove by one last time. A moving truck was in the driveway. Children I didn't know ran across the yard that had, for a brief and painful time, been mine, at least on paper. I felt no sadness, no longing, only closure as I drove away. Some betrayals cut so deep they rewire who you are. I was no longer the easygoing, overly trusting version of myself that existed before Danielle's deception. But I was stronger. I had fought for myself, legally, emotionally, financially, and I was still standing. 6 months into Danielle's prison sentence, the foreclosure sign was gone, replaced by a tidy mailbox and a new family. I passed by occasionally, not out of regret, but with curiosity, observing how life simply moved on. That house, once the symbol of everything I'd lost, was just a house again. Meanwhile, my life was slowly repairing itself. My credit score had climbed into the fair range. The fraudulent accounts were off my record, though explanatory remarks would follow me for years. I'd settled into a smaller, more secure apartment, complete with a locked mailbox only I could access. A small detail, but it mattered. The paranoia that had once consumed me hadn't vanished. It had simply become manageable. What really anchored me was therapy. My weekly sessions with Dr. Elaine Winters became a lifeline. I had been hesitant at first, unsure if I could spill my story to yet another stranger, but the safety of her neutral office gave me room to finally breathe. "Family betrayal creates a unique kind of trauma," Dr. Winters said early on. "The people meant to protect us become the ones who harm us. That leaves a scar that changes how we connect." "Will I ever trust again?" I asked, half joking. "You'll trust differently," she said, "with intention. That's not a flaw, it's growth." And she was right. I hadn't closed myself off. I just learned to guard the door. My relationship with my parents was slowly mending, though it would never quite return to what it once was. The divide caused by Danielle's betrayal, and their instinct to protect her even after the damage was done, left a residue we couldn't fully wipe away. I needed to be seen as the victim, not just another daughter in a tangled family mess. They were trying to see that now. We all were. Sunday dinners had resumed, though less often, and wrapped in gentle, practiced avoidance of anything too raw. "Your father and I visited Danielle yesterday," my mother said one evening, watching me closely for a reaction. "How is she?" I asked, surprised by the flicker of genuine curiosity in my own voice. "She's teaching an ESL class. Said she's helping a few women prepare for their GEDs." Mom paused. "She asked about you." I gave a small nod, but said nothing more. I still wasn't ready to see Danielle face to face, to sit across from her in a sterile visitation room, hearing apologies that couldn't unwrite the past. Maybe someday, but not yet. My father, who had remained mostly silent on the subject for months, suddenly spoke. "She's changed in there. Quieter. Reflective. I think." I think she finally understands what she did to you." It was the first time he'd clearly acknowledged my pain over hers. His words landed softly, but carried weight. "Thank you for saying that, Dad," I said, my voice quiet. Surprisingly, it was my extended family who stepped up when I least expected it. My cousin Rachel, who I'd barely spoken to in years, invited me to coffee and confessed something she'd never shared. "My college roommate stole my identity," she said. "Maxed out credit cards, trashed my credit. I pressed charges, lost friends over it, but I'd do it again in a heartbeat." It was the first time I felt truly understood, without having to explain the layers of betrayal. Through her, I found an online support group for identity theft victims. Later, I began attending in-person sessions through a local financial crime survivor network. There, surrounded by people who'd faced the same uphill climb, I no longer had to defend my decisions. They already knew. They'd lived it. Eventually, I got involved with a nonprofit dedicated to helping victims rebuild. After leaning on their resources for months, I started volunteering, walking others through the red tape of credit disputes, police reports, and legal documents. It didn't erase what happened, but it gave it purpose. "You have a real gift for this," Margot, the director of the nonprofit, told me after sitting in on one of my peer support sessions. "You're honest with them, realistic, but still kind. You don't let them drown in false hope, but you never let them feel alone either." Her words stayed with me. The work didn't erase what had happened, but it reshaped it. Danielle's betrayal had left a scar, but also a purpose. If I couldn't undo the damage, I could at least use my experience to make someone else's path a little less lonely. Moving into my new apartment had started out as a necessity. My previous lease had ended, and after legal fees and months of credit repair, I needed something modest. But the new space became more than shelter. It became a symbol, a space that reflected who I was becoming, not who I had been. I still filled it with plants, as always, but I also invested in things that felt new. A locking file cabinet, a fireproof safe, not because I expected another betrayal, but because I'd learned the value of protecting myself, practically and emotionally. Nearly a year into Danielle's sentence, I received a letter. It wasn't like the others. It wasn't about her pain. This time, it was about mine. "I've been working with a therapist here," she wrote. "She's helping me understand that accountability means more than saying, 'I'm sorry.' I stole more than your identity, Lauren. I stole your sense of safety, your belief in family, and your trust in me. I know I can't undo that. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even asking for a reply. I just want you to know. I see it now. I really see it. I didn't respond right away, but I didn't throw it out either. I read it again and again, letting the words settle. This apology felt different, real, rooted in awareness. And though it didn't erase the past, it softened something inside me. Around that same time, something unexpected happened. I used a portion of the restitution, finally arriving from seized assets, to put a deposit on a small house with a quiet yard, perfect for an expanded garden. The irony didn't escape me. My sister's crime had falsely given me a home. Now, through resilience and restitution, I was buying one on my own terms. The day I signed the mortgage, my pen hovered for a beat too long. "Is everything all right, Ms. Mitchell?" the loan officer asked gently. "Yes," I said, pressing my signature onto the page. "Everything is finally mine." Better than fine, actually. Taking ownership of my new home became a powerful act of reclamation. I painted the walls in soft greens and warm neutrals, colors that brought me peace. I planted a modest vegetable garden in the backyard and filled the front porch with hanging ferns. When I hosted a small housewarming gathering, it marked my first real celebration since discovering the theft. Stephanie brought champagne and a doormat that read, "Not today, identity thieves." Her dark humor made me laugh in a way I hadn't for months. My parents came too, bringing a ficus tree and cautious, slightly awkward good wishes. They were trying, in their own quiet, imperfect way, to support this chapter of my life while still maintaining their connection to Danielle. "It's a beautiful home, Lauren," my mother said, pulling me into a surprisingly tight hug. "We're proud of you," my father added. "For buying a house?" I asked, half smiling. For everything, he replied, for the way you've handled it, with strength and grace. It wasn't full healing, not yet, maybe not ever, but it was a kind of recognition, and it mattered. 2 weeks later, I did something I'd been thinking about for months. I drove to the Federal Correctional Institute outside Colorado Springs and submitted the paperwork to add my name to Danielle's visitor list. I wasn't ready to walk into that room yet, but I wanted to have the option open for when or if that day ever came. Rebuilding my life hasn't been a straight path. Some days, I feel strong and forward-moving. Other days, the betrayal returns with sharp edges, as if it all just happened. But I've learned to let both truths exist. What happened between Danielle and me isn't a story with a perfect ending. It's not something that gets fixed with a letter or a sentence served. The bond we had as sisters was broken. Maybe not beyond all repair, but certainly beyond the version we once knew. I still don't know if I'll ever trust her again. But I've survived the unimaginable. I've reclaimed my autonomy. I've discovered that trust must be earned, and that love, real love, includes accountability. If this story has taught me anything, it's this: standing up for yourself, even when it means standing alone, is an act of courage, not cruelty. And if you've ever had to fight to protect your peace, I hope you'll subscribe to this channel, because this story isn't over. I'm still here, still healing, still growing, and still writing what comes next. If you've made it this far, thank you, truly. This story wasn't easy to tell, but I believe it needed to be heard. I'm Lauren Mitchell, and if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted deeply, I see you. And I hope you see a bit of yourself in my journey. If my story struck a chord, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Share your support, your own experience, or even just a word of encouragement. I read them, every single one. They remind me I'm not alone, and neither are you. And if you're facing something similar, let me say this: protect your peace. Set the boundary. File the report. Ask the hard questions. Family doesn't mean allowing someone to trample over your future without consequence. Love can still exist where trust has been broken, but love without accountability is not love at all. Please consider subscribing if you believe in the power of reclaiming your voice. This channel is more than just storytelling. It's about healing, about lifting each other up after the fall. Let's keep this space real, raw, and honest. Because the truth? Survivors aren't weak. We're warriors in disguise. And your story matters too.